Hello, this is Nathan Akpan, speaker, author, life and transformational coach, all-around nerd. In this video, I want to share with you 4 things that I found very interesting, or that I learned, or nuggets that I gleaned from the movie Harriet. It just so happens that I happened to see this movie with a friend who drugged me along to see it. In spite of my initial protests, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And as is always the case when I digest information like this or material like this, I'm kind of reviewing it against ideas that I agree with philosophically and that I teach, to look for teaching points that I can share with others, or benefits that I can find beyond what was on that screen, beyond the just empty entertainment. And I happen to find this movie, Harriet, very interesting, and I want to share with you 4 things that I learned from it and 4 things that you can learn from it. And I want to start with number 1, without further ado. And if you haven't seen the movie, please go see it. I think there is a lesson for every single one of us. And it being, obviously it was a movie about the slave trade and about Harriet Tubman. But I think regardless of your skin color or race, there is a movie, a lesson we can learn from it, because it is indeed ultimately the story of humankind. It is a story of us all. But as far as the philosophical lessons gleaned from it, I want to share these lessons. Actually, I'm going to add number 5 because I just thought about something here. All right, let us start. Number 1. The first thing that I have written down here is that a misfortune, every misfortune, when looked upon properly, could be seen as a blessing. Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich said that every misfortune has with it the seed of equivalent or greater good. And in this case of Miss Tubman, that was not an exception at all. And I want to share with you 2 instances that this occurred. The first one, and this shouldn't be a spoiler for the movie, I took effort to ensure that I didn't spoil the movie for you. So if you haven't seen it, you're not going to be missing anything. You're not going to be clued into anything. Let's put it that way. You're still going to need to see the movie. But the first one was that Harriet, even from her personal history, suffered a head injury. Apparently, when she was younger, she was hit in the head with basically what was intended to be a weapon against somebody else. And she stepped in and took that hit. She took that hit right on her forehead. And after that moment, she began to experience basically seizures. And these seizures caused her to see what she believed was God. And if you spot on the movie where she was actually hit, she was hit right in the middle of the forehead, which would also correspond with the location of the pineal gland. And so, for all intents and purposes, this event that was viewed as a misfortune, it was a traumatic one in her life, actually opened her up to having extrasensory ability. She was able to have out-of-body experiences where she was able to basically foresee the future. She was able to tap into infinite storehouses of knowledge that gave her an additional edge, this extrasensory perception, where she was able to see what was going to happen. And that ability gave her the gift of being able to navigate certain situations that came in super handy in her being able to free herself from slavery, but also help the other people who were beneficiaries of her, abilities. She freed a lot of people, but let us trace it back to this one thing that was viewed as a misfortune, and that was her head injury. The second thing that was seen as a misfortune was the situation with her husband. Things didn't turn out exactly the way she wanted it to. I'm not going to say any more than that so I don't have to spoil the movie for those who haven't seen it. But she suffered a misfortune in that aspect also. And if you watch the movie, it even says, now I know that this thing that I thought was going to be this way happened to be leading me to something else. And so many times in our lives, we have expectations for something to happen. We hang our hopes in a situation or in a person, but all of a sudden, misfortune happens. And that thing that we really, really wanted falls through. And as Steve Jobs says, we cannot connect the dots looking forward. We can only connect them looking backwards. And in hindsight, Harriet happened to be the beneficiary of this misfortune also that occurred in relation to her husband. That's point number one. And point number one was that a misfortune could be a blessing in your life, or practically every misfortune, when looked upon from the right angle, from the right perspective, or from a far enough time in the future when looked back, had something to teach us. Number two was this thought that I wrote down, and it said, when you move, God moves. There were so many things in Harriet's life. There were so many things that would never have changed. She came upon instances where she had the choice to either give up, turn around, go back, and she chose not to. In that particular moment, she took a step of faith. She stepped into the unknown. And when you move, the divine moves, right? And so this is a lesson for every single one of us. If you're waiting for the answers to your dreams, if you're waiting to the answers to your prayers without taking that step of faith, without literally, as Harriet did in that movie, taking that leap of faith where she jumped. Those of you who've seen it will know what I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but she did take several leaps of faith. And in those instances, her faith was tested, but it was never for nothing. She got pretty much a miraculous intervention, if you would want to look at it that way. So if there's something on your heart, something that you are contemplating, something you feel very, very strongly about, but you're wondering if it is going to work, you're going to have to move, because it is not until then that the path shall be revealed to you. Do not take reckless, steps. However, follow that prompting in your heart. And when you move, the divine will move. Number three, this is a thought that is not mentioned in the movie, but it is one that I found I had researched Harriet about a year and a half ago for a video that I had made previously. And this was a thought that I used in that particular video. And it came to me as I was watching this movie. And it was one that she said. She said, I could have freed, she actually said, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. It was a very poignant statement, because there were certain instances where people who were slaves actually chose not to be free. They chose to stay back because somehow they bought into this idea of slavery. They, in some cases, never really saw themselves as slaves anymore. They saw themselves as being part of some kind of divine order. However, she freed a lot of people, those who realized that, hell, this is not the life I was born to live. I need to see freedom before I die. They're going back to that thought. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. And the question is there something in your life that is keeping you from reaching the desire of your heart that may not be realized by you? Something that is quite insidious enough that you may accept it as being part of the way life is. And the question is, how do we reveal this thing? How do we know that the situation we're in is one that we might be blinded to? And the answer to that question is you want to investigate your heart. You want to see, do I desire to be free, and yet am I relegated to this current position? Have I accepted where I am as the will of God? And is where I am unsatisfactory? Because let me tell you something. The greatest desire of the infinite is constant growth and constant expansion. not stagnation, not regression. And if you're experiencing stagnation and regression, you understand that you are a slave to an idea, because it is your right, it is your natural propensity, as it is for every creature in creation, from the shark to the oak tree, to grow and to expand. And if you are not growing, and if you're not expanding, something is holding you back. I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. That is something worth thinking about. And that was point number 3. Point number 4 is that every single one of us is unique. We are born unique in spite of the family we were born into. You see, Harriet was born into a family of slaves, yet she knew she was free. She knew she had the soul of a warrior leader, a free person, and she decided to die or try, because she knew slavery was not her portion. You know, if she had looked around and said, well, dad was a slave, mom was a slave, my siblings were slaves, so I guess I'm born to be a slave, that would have been a terrible idea. She never compared herself to anybody that she was around, because she accepted her uniqueness as an individual. And beautiful thing enough, that decision to pursue her own individuality unlocked the door to freedom of those around them. Your decision to follow your uniqueness, your individuality, to fan the flames that is within you, could light other people up. You are the candle that lights the world. Never compare yourself to the family you were born into. If you feel something different, you better try to express that idea. Finally is the thought of slavery. This thought came to me days after I've seen that movie, and it occurred to me that there were people who died to maintain the status quo, because that's just what they wanted. And so you must realize that every single day we must continue to check ourselves to find out if we are on the wrong side of history, and if we are willing to stake our lives to be on the wrong side of history because it is comfortable. The slaves' owners didn't want to lose their slaves because it would cost them money, in spite of some of them knowing that what they were doing were wrong. They chose to die because we're not going to lose our property. We're not going to lose our wealth and our value. So you want to check yourself. Which side of history are you on? Are you holding on to things? Are you holding on to worldly worldly measures of wealth, when you know that there's something else that you're supposed to be doing to elevate humanity? Which will you choose? These are the 5 thoughts I got from that movie. You would think, was he even enjoying the movie, or was he thinking philosophy during the movie? Well, it is my intention to share some more of my thoughts with you on social media, wherever it is that you're watching this. Please leave a comment. Let me know if you enjoyed any of these thoughts that I shared today, and which specifically it was that you enjoyed most. I thank you for watching. No matter what, be the best you can be. This is Nathan Akpan. Thank you.